Look, there is being naked and then very naked. And the Mockingbird media has made themselves very, very naked. And this comes in the wake of President Trump's speech and some comparisons to some things. First of all, let's start with this. We knew that we had 4 years without a president. We all knew that figurehead Biden was just that, a figurehead with people pulling his strings and telling him what to do. The House Oversight Committee went and gathered every document they could find with Biden's signature on it over the course of his, and they wrote presidency, over the course of his time in the figureheadisms. Or figureheadicity. That's a made-up word. Every single one of them used the auto pen, except for the announcement that he was dropping out of the race. On that one was his actual signature. And we all know why. Because they didn't want him to be able to back out and say, I never signed that. It was an auto pen. Do you remember when Speaker Johnson called him out on something that he had signed and Biden sit there and said he hadn't done that? The Mockingbird media didn't jump in and say, wait. How many of these things did Biden even know about? He was the perfect figurehead. So now we have a president who is vitally aware of what his administration is doing or trying to get done in the midst of a judicial coup attempt, which is, at this point, pretty successful. So this is a Harvard poll, Harvard poll, looking at the president's speech. Views of Trump's speech among specific voters, watchers, 76% approve, 76%, 23% disapprove. Pardon me, this is NBC News YouGov, not Harvard. The time Trump spent on things you care about. 63% of people said President Trump spent a lot of time on things they care about, and 28% said a little, and 9% said none at all. 62%. Now, this is absolutely key because the things DC cares about, and I'll show this for you in a second, play this for you in a second, simply are not the things that the American people care about, particularly when you get to the deep state. They simply do not relate to reality. And that's sometimes an easy thing, to fall out of reality. You may have fallen out of reality in the way your body works, for instance. You might just have all of a sudden become used to the fact that you're never going to get a solid night of sleep. And you're never going to feel relaxed. That does not have to be the case. I mean, there's a lot to do with this. One would be praying to God, and having a good prayer life and abiding with Jesus will get you there. Another is to take advantage of the common blessings that God provides, like magnesium. So magnesium is short. Most Americans, 80% of us, are short on magnesium. Here's what happens with that. You end up in a high degree of stress because the stress hormone cortisol is not controlled. You end up with lack of sleep because of that stress. You end up being irregular, which incidentally puts a ton of stress on your organs and wakes you up at night to pee. So here's a simple thing to do, which I do every single day. I use Magnesium Breakthrough. It is organic magnesium, 7 forms. It is the full spectrum. Nothing like this available at the China Marts. So go to bioptimizers.com/Todd. Use promo code Todd to get 10% off all their products, including Magnesium Breakthrough, and subscribe. That way you never lack sleep, and you get free offers and exclusive discounts. Bioptimizers.com/Todd, promo code Todd. Care about your body in the way that the bureaucrats in D.C. don't care about the things we do. So 63% of people said that President Trump spent a lot of time on things they care about. Here's a federal worker who shows herself utterly divorced from what people actually care about.
So we've all heard about Trump's executive order to end DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion within the federal government. I am a federal worker, and I logged into work yesterday to attend a division meeting. I'm on maternity leave right now, so I didn't have to attend this meeting, but my boss suggested that I attend to hear
extra special points for you.
Updates with all the executive orders and all the craziness going on. And lo and behold, I see that there's an email talking about how we need to have a standardized email signature.
Like every other office.
Standardized email signature must not include any pronouns. So if your name is Taylor, Jordan, Jesse, other gender-neutral unisex names, you cannot have he, she, they, them.
Yeah, that's not what it's about. And everybody knows that's not what it's about. And what she's saying is, you mean we're going to have to operate just like the world has for the past 400 years? Ever since email existed, there's been Jordans and there's been Pats. And there's been every other name that you construe to be male or female. And guess what? We adapted. My bookkeeper's name is Kyle. She's a woman. And every time someone contacts her, they call her Mr. And she has to do the uncomfortable thing and saying, actually, I'm a woman. My name is Kyle. My dad just liked the name. So that's not what this is about, and everybody knows it, but that's DC. They're taking our pronouns away. And the Mockingbird media covers for this. Just like they covered for the fact that we really didn't have a president under figurehead Biden, whose regime was apparently being run by AutoPen. Back to the poll. YouGov, NBC News, or CBS News poll. Now, can I just get the poll right? CBS News. Did I say NBC News? You talk about this. I got the Biden brain so bad. Does Trump have a clear plan for inflation? Among speech watchers, 68% yes, 32% no. Like Trump's plan for waste in government spending, 77% like it, 23% do not. Immigration and the border, 77% like it, 23% do not. Ukraine and Russia, 73% like it, 27% do not. Tariffs, 65-35. And if you listen to the Mockingbird media or you watch them, they talk about these protests breaking out. It's like the nation got bad herpes. It's just breaking out. No, they're not. They're paid for protests. They're largely organized by federal employees unions. They're not breaking out. They're being organized. And the Mockingbird media has to cover for that as well. Back to the poll. Trump described crime problem as 68%, about as it is. 22% worse than it really is. 10% not as bad as it really is. Having congressmen removed from chamber for interrupting the speech, 76% approve, 24% disapprove. And this goes to one of my central points about President Trump is the Mockingbird media and the Democrats, which is the same thing, cannot cause more people to hate Trump. They have reached their ceiling. They're not going to expand into a new base. They can't get there. So when you look at all this coverage and you look at some of the things DC was concerned about, let's think about Dan Goldman. Dan Goldman had himself a concern.
When I was walking over here after we just voted, outside the Capitol, I saw a huge poster with a swastika on it. And I know you've spoken a lot about the rise of anti-Semitism, anti-Israel sentiment post-October 7th.
At liberal college campuses? Sorry to interrupt you, Dan. I know you're very, very important, having purchased your seat using inherited Levi Strauss money.
And I agree with you about that, and I condemn it wholeheartedly. Mm-hmm. But we're also seeing a rise of neo-Nazi attitudes online. And
he did see, on the way over to the Capitol, he did see there were Nazi signs. There were a lot of them. And the swastika disgusts me. Oh, it was held in the hands of people at organized paid-for protests by federal government workers who have determined that because President Trump wants to control the spending in the executive branch, which is his constitutional prerogative, that's the new Hitler attitude. That I'm actually going to take a constitutionally provisions, it's not a privilege, it's a role. And it's something for which he's held to account. That is controlling the spending in the executive. And that's now the new Hitler thing. So Goldman's not lying. He saw the swastikas, but they weren't from Trump supporters. Now, all of this comes as we're watching the Supreme Court and in the personage of John Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett do something to me which constitutes the actual constitutional crisis. That a judge in a tiny district who is appointed has determined that President Trump, in fact, does not have Article 2, Section 5 constitutional control over the executive, because it says right there that the powers of the executive reside in a president. So you have the Supreme Court come along in really decided by Coney Barrett and the Chief Justice Roberts. They're pretending they didn't make a decision on the core question here, which is, can these judges from small districts, can they create nationwide rulings? They pretended to not rule on that, but they did. By virtue of their ruling that President Trump has to release these dollars. And the reasoning is this. There's been work done, and these organizations deserve to be paid for the work. Oh, they do. So the work of exporting atheism to Nepal is something that those organizations deserve to be paid to do, because we don't do that in America. We don't export enough atheism through Hollywood, etc. They do not deserve to be paid for work that is outside the role of government, such as censorship. And Internews was one of those organizations that was involved in censorship. They don't get to do that on behalf of the federal government. Federal government cannot outsource that which they're not allowed to do on their own. They don't get to deputize people to do that, and the media is covering for this. Now, the good news in this is that the Mockingbird media continues to make themselves less and less important, less and less relevant, and they continue to empower independent media. And that's good news. Representative Jerry Conley, it says that it is un-American to do something, and he here wants to speak the language of constitutionalism. So he's talking about illegal immigration, but he also wants to get into some constitutional structures, but he has it exactly upside down.
At this year's Conservative Political Action Conference, Board czar Tom Homan said he is, quote, bringing hell to the city of Boston until it complies with his demands. I don't know what that means. Boston is my hometown, and I'm glad to welcome our mayor, Mayor Wu, and her 1-month-old baby here today. But I don't know that Boston welcomes Mr. Homan or anyone else bringing hell to the city. The Republican crusade against local independence doesn't just undermine public safety in our communities. It is blatantly cruel, and I say inhumane and un-American.
The sign they held up behind him was a crying youngster, apparently during an ICE raid, and it's not Homan's demands. Homan did not seize control of the country. He's enforcing written, actual immigration law. And maybe he shouldn't have said that he's bringing hell. Maybe he shouldn't have said that, but he did. But Conley here wants to say, well, wait, we have to have this local control, this local independence. No, I'm sorry. On the topic of immigration, that is held at the executive level. It's held at the federal level. And of course, you're not going to see Conley come and talk about independence of states when it comes to things like, what are we supposed to call it? Reproductive rights. They're not going to talk that way when it comes to issues like that, or issues of medical treatment for confused, mentally ill, mentally challenged kids who've been conned by society into wanting to harm themselves. They can't, and the Mockingbird media is covering for all of that. And actually, it's great news, because the Mockingbird media is continuing to empower independent media and even talk radio. Even in this day and age, they continue to do that.